evening, everybody. We're going to get started in a few minutes. We do have sign language interpreters, and if there's anybody who needs Spanish language interpretation, it's in the back here. We are recording this session. My name is Amy Rufo. I'm one of the Home Rule Study Commissioners. There are other commissioners in the audience. Could you guys stand, please, just so folks know? Okay. So tonight's presentation is in two parts. First, you'll hear from the commission, and then you'll hear from the mayor. And at the end, we will take questions. I have to go down. Okay, so we're going to just baseline so everybody's on the same page. A home rule charter is basically our constitution for our local government. It means that we make the rules at home, and the charter defines who and how decisions are made at the local level. We transfer the power to act on local affairs from the state to the local government, and as I said, the charter serves as our constitution. So there's a lot of reasons to explore home rule. As you know, City Council and Administration proposed that the exploration of home rules, and voters agreed. We started a study period and then a drafting period. The commission learned during the study period, we learned of limitations in the state code, and those codes no longer met our needs. The codes are one size fits all, with a limited flexibility to deal with issues that are specific to our city. The current budget timeline is short. There are outdated requirements related to the controller and treasurer. There's limited and burdensome solutions for citizens' initiative and petition, and an outdated tax code that has limitations. The original intent of the Home Rule law was for good government, to remove cookie-cutter state municipal code, permit flexibility in defining the structure, powers, and functions of the municipality, and importantly, to allow for self-government. The Home Rule Study Commissioners expressed their own reasons, and those included improving public participation, strengthening financial procedures, consider a code of conduct, and transferring the power from state to local government. The charter makes some notable improvements. We require a 5-year capital budgeting and a longer and more publicly engaged process for the adoption of annual budgets. There's a requirement for quarterly public budget reviews by the administration with City Council. There's the expansion of powers and responsibilities of the controller and the elimination of the position of treasurer. The charter creates an ethics commission and more stringent requirements for elected officials both to qualify for their positions and to perform their duties. The charter expanded powers for residents to have ordinances adopted or repealed on their behalf, either by City Council or through the referendum process. There's an increased flexibility on taxation to provide another tool to maintain and improve city finances. So a charter is made up of articles. Another word for that would be chapters. And all of the articles in the charter are listed here. We're not going to go through all of those, but you can read about them in the summary document that's on this table over here, and also in the full charter that's online. So we will be reviewing the preamble, fiscal and budget procedures, citizen petition and referendum, ethics commission, and controller. This is the preamble, and it's the foundation of our charter. We, the people of the city of Lancaster, PA, aspire to establish the foundation of an accessible, ethical, and transparent government. The charter provides for equitable representation, sound fiscal management, public health, safety, and welfare, as well as a measure of local control. We do ordain and ratify this Home Rule Charter for the City of Lancaster. And now I'm going to hand it over to John.
Thanks, Amy. Okay, yeah, my name is John McGraham, another Home Rule Study Commissioner, and I'm going to talk over the next few slides about some of the articles. I'm going to talk first about fiscal procedures related to budget and finance. The most important items are displayed on the slide. One of the most important differences is that we require that the budget be introduced quite a bit earlier in October. And at that time, the public is provided with the mayor's budget message and some related documents. Following that, the council must hold at least one special hearing to review the budget. And in the new charter, we define a process where citizens can submit questions related to the budget and define a process for how they can expect responses to those questions in writing. We also require a lengthier outlook. We require a 3-year budget forecast, so the upcoming year, the upcoming year plus 2 years. In the budget presentation, the administration is required to highlight new programs, expanded programs, and abolished programs. Once the budget is introduced, council may amend the budget after the public hearing. Regardless of how council starts to proceed, they must adopt the budget 16 days before the end of the fiscal year. And if council fails to adopt it, then the mayor's proposed budget becomes the official budget for the upcoming year. In the charter, we also include a taxpayer protection clause. This is where budgeted year-over-year total tax revenue may not increase more than 6% without an additional supermajority action by council. The other requirement that we added is for a capital budget, and for this would be for any major investment of a new building, fire truck, equipment like that, or investments like that. For this, we're requiring the administration to submit a 5-year capital program plan. That must be done no later than June 30th of each year. It goes through a similar series of procedures for review by council and approval. And council is then responsible for adopting or amending the capital program no later than September 30th. And this provides the opportunity then for the results of the capital budget process to be incorporated into the upcoming general fund approval process. Also, as part of that, we require capital spending reports at the conclusion of any capital project. This would include original estimates of project and financing costs, and an explanation about any important differences between projected costs and actual costs. So we feel like these changes provide for a much lengthier and more thorough process for citizen feedback and community engagement around the budget. We also introduced some improved options for citizen participation. There's 2 or 3 ways that this is important. The first and most straightforward way is for citizens to petition City Council to either add a specific item as an agenda item on an upcoming meeting, or to hold a special meeting around a specific topic. To achieve this, so I'll talk about what is required in the way of signatures to achieve some of the things described in this slide. All these are estimates based. It's related to turnout in the most recent mayoral election. So, for what I just described, a petition to have either an agenda item added or an item added to a City Council agenda or a special City Council meeting, approximately 300 signatures would be required on a petition for that. Additionally, citizens can bring an ordinance to City Council or ask City Council to repeal an existing ordinance. To do this requires a higher threshold. That would require about 1,200 signatures. And related to that, if the community would do that, would bring an ordinance to City Council, and City Council would fail to act on that, that could move forward as a referendum item and be on an upcoming election day ballot. The difference is, current code current state code doesn't allow the first option at all. There's no path at this time in the existing state code for citizens to bring an agenda item to City Council. There is a path for citizens to bring an ordinance to City Council, but the threshold is much higher, and the requirement to collect those signatures requires people to come to City Hall to sign the petitions, whereas our new charter allows for those petitions to be circulated and taken door to door in the community. The other thing that we've added is an ethics commission. And it's important to note that Lancaster does not have a history of ethics complaints, but we do feel like there is an existing state ethics board where complaints at this time could be made to a state level board. We felt that there was a benefit to have a local ethics commission, and the purpose of this is to educate elected officials, staff, and public on the State Ethics Act, to investigate any complaints of wrongdoing, and to enforce the rules. With this, to form this ethics, there would be a public register of nominees to the Ethics Commission, and the final members would be selected from that public register. Appointments will be made to reflect the city's diversity, and there's a restriction that Ethics Commission members may not hold city-appointed or elected office for 1 year immediately prior to serving on the commission, or from holding any political party office or political action committee position for 1 year immediately prior to serving on the commission. And the members for this commission are appointed, 2 people are appointed by the mayor, 3 by city council, and 2 by the elected city controller. We did discuss our legislative branch, city council. We made minimal changes to this. The most important changes are that we now require city council candidates to live in the city for 2 years prior to running for office. Currently, the requirement is for 1 year. And we say that city council members are no longer eligible for benefits such as health insurance or a pension. And I'm going to turn it back over to Amy.
I'll just quickly note that this presentation and the presentation that the mayor is going to give are on our website. Okay, so for the mayor, we made some minimal changes in that we've decided that in order to run for election, you must live in the city for 4 years rather than 1 year. With the controller, we expanded fiscal review responsibilities. The controller will advise council on the mayor's proposed budgets, provide performance audits to city departments, offices, boards, and commissions, and may recommend hiring a deputy who is a licensed public accountant. We did eliminate the treasurer's commission because the functions were assigned to the Department of Administrative Services, and the part-time elected position didn't seem to be necessary. Let's see, next. So as part of the charter, we have 2 big other articles. One is the administrative code, and the other is the transition. The administrative code is a set of laws that detail how local government operates. The code outlines processes and procedures for the operation of city government. It sets the rules and requirements for personnel, budgeting, purchasing, bidding, and more. It establishes departments, offices, authorities, boards, and commissions. Should home rule pass, council will have up to 18 months to pass by ordinance an administrative code. Any future amendments to the code must be done by ordinance. The transition article defines the procedure for us to transition from our current form of government to a new form of government under home rule. The transition article maintains our legal and personnel continuity, and it requires that we adopt an ethics code within 12 months and an administrative code within 18 months. The transition article creates a 3-person committee made up of the mayor or their designee, 1 member of council, and 1 member from the Home Rule Commission. This committee will be responsible to facilitate the transition, hold public meetings, to inform citizens of progress, and the committee members will serve without compensation. Okay, back to John.
Okay, I'm going to talk over the next couple slides about taxes. I'll speak to how the charter addresses that, and then the mayor will also talk at greater length about this in her presentation. We've heard a lot throughout this process about taxes, about desire for increased tax flexibility, and during our study phase, we learned some things. We learned that cities like Lancaster rely on a mix of taxes that were set more than 60 years ago. And all of these taxes are either at a flat rate that can't be changed or are capped. And as a result, cities like Lancaster are limited in their ability to raise additional revenue in the face of rising expenses, and as many people know, become overly reliant on property taxes. In addition to that, there's a large number of properties in the city that are tax exempt. Those properties don't pay any property tax at all. In Pennsylvania, there are some cities that have some unique advantages and that do not exist here. One of the questions that's come up a lot, we've had people ask us frequently about business privilege tax. And that used to be a thing in Pennsylvania. That was something that cities were permitted to add until 1988. At that time, the state legislature passed a law eliminating that as an option. Cities that had the business privilege tax in place before then were allowed to keep it. They could no longer change the rate, but no cities after that time have been allowed to add a business privilege tax. So that option does not exist for Lancaster. And there's also some cities in Pennsylvania that get the benefit of some gambling revenue proceeds where that's an option, but that's not an option here. So how does Home Rule provide some additional flexibility? So Home Rule lifts the caps on all municipal tax rates. It's important to note, Home Rule does not allow a municipality to create new taxes that don't exist. Home Rule does not permit a municipality to levy a commuter wage or to tax nonprofits. And the other thing that's important to say is that Home Rule does not set the tax rates. The Commission is not responsible for setting the tax rates. Tax rates have always been set by the elected officials, City Council and the Mayor, and that will continue to be the case in the future. You will elect the people from this point forward who will set your tax rates just like you always have. Increased tax flexibility may allow the city to balance revenue sources to avoid overburdening any one group. And as I mentioned in an earlier slide, the charter implements a 6% limit on year-over-year tax increases in total tax revenue. Some of the things that we've heard is that people worry that the charter will raise their taxes, and that's not that we don't set tax rates. And taxes will adjust, up or down as a result of the city's financial situation, and not specifically with anything to do with the charter. Again, you'll hear more about that, but the charter doesn't by itself will not be the cause of increased taxes. That's a result of financial situations and the need for revenue to provide the services that residents of Lancaster count on. Again, we do hear that people worry that the charter will allow the city to invent new taxes. It's not the case. And that the charter will allow City Council to raise taxes as high as they like. And again, we have a 6% year-over-year limit. And the other thing that's important to note is that actually at this time, there is, while there is a cap that exists on property tax millage, we're pretty far away from that. And City Council could implement a very significant tax. There's no limit similar to our proposed taxpayer protection clause now. City Council could impose a pretty significant limit in the next budget year, and has a lot of capacity to do so given the current cap. So we believe we provide a greater level of protection in the new charter than what exists today. But because we've heard a lot of people worry about taxes, there'll be time for questions later. Yep. We know that people are worried about this and how this might go in the future. And because of that, we asked our consultants to do some additional research on how things have gone in home rule municipalities in Pennsylvania. So they researched 82 home rule municipalities to determine actual taxation practices and found that increasing the rates of earned income tax and real estate tax after home rule is approved is rare. In those 82 municipalities, property tax rates did not increase 63% of the time. And following home rule adoption, most municipalities set the income tax rate once, maybe twice, and then the income tax rate remained unchanged year over year 90% of the time. There are two other taxes there that are currently collected. Those are real estate transfer tax and I always forget the fourth one. Local service tax. And those, real estate transfer tax rarely changes and local service tax does not change. And I'm going to turn it back to Amy and she's going to wrap up our presentation.
Okay, so just to recap, the charter will serve as our constitution for the city of Lancaster. We made significant improvements by creating a local ethics commission, the budgeting process, citizens initiative and referendum, and flexible tax revenue resources. The charter will make citizen participation easier. It will make budgetary policy more transparent and creates the possibility of more equitable taxation. The charter will ensure the city's ability to provide and improve services that Lancaster residents rely on, and in the end, it's up to the Lancaster voters, the residents of the city, to decide whether we adopt the charter at our upcoming election. And so we will take questions, but we're going to take them after the mayor's presentation. And should anyone have a question they don't want to actually ask in person, we have cards and pens over here. You can write them down. Do you have to?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fifth and final meeting related to home rule. We are just 2 weeks out from the election, which is very exciting and also a little nerve-wracking for a lot of things in our country at the moment. I really want to thank the Home Rule Study Commissioners, both John and Amy, Commissioners Rufo and McGran, as well as Commissioner Dastra, Commissioner Barber, and Commissioner Cook, who are here. I appreciate the many hours that you have put into this process since we got going officially last summer. So to begin, I want to begin by talking about what city services do our tax dollars support now? And in order for us to situate this conversation, I want to just first begin by setting a little context. The City of Lancaster is about a $140 million organization. Tonight we're going to be talking about half of our total budget. It is the part that is paid by taxes, not fees. This part is referred to as the general fund, in contrast to the water fund, the stormwater fund, the sewer fund, and the solid waste and recycling fund. These are all separate funds in which city residents, as well as in some cases, residents who live outside of the city, pay a fee for water or sewer and so on. our biggest expense is public safety. It comprises 60% of the budget. It's about $40 million annually. And this includes costs for both active employees and retirees. The next largest expenditure is Public Works, and this comprises 10% of the general fund. And I think it's just interesting that we go from 40% of the budget, 60% of the budget to 10% of the budget. It just shows you the gap in cost between these two major line items and what it costs for public safety, and then our next largest expenditure being Public Works. Obviously, you see our Public Works crews out on the street. They are responsible for maintaining our public right-of-ways, our parks, and more. And we appreciate that they've gotten a lot more paving done this year than in previous years. I also want to talk about some of the fixed expenses that are in our budget. So these expenses include debt service at $7.5 million, pension obligations, and medical benefits. Our debt service over the years has paid for upgrades to our city parks, the ADA improvements that have been required by the federal government, the replacement of facilities, including our fire stations and our operations center. And then we also have a very big expense related to our pension and medical, which year over year are the largest cost drivers for the city of Lancaster. So what taxes pay for these services? Well, you heard a little bit about this already in the conversation with Amy and John, but there are four. And the first one is real estate taxes. That's set by mayor and council. We are currently at 12.64 mils, and there is a 30 mil cap. We have an earned income tax, which is currently 0.6%. It has been 0.5 since 1965, and in 2004, an additional 0.1% was added because we gave up another tax to add to the 0.1. And then we also have the local services tax, which is $47 a year, and that is paid by those who work in the city. This is the only tax that is paid by non-city residents, and it works out to $1 a week. 5 of those $52 goes to the school district and 47 come to the city, and it was originally intended to offset the costs that are related to public safety, but we also know that this is generating about $1.5 million a year, and our public safety budget is a lot more. And then we have the real estate transfer tax, which is also set by state law at 0.5 of a sale price. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these last two taxes because, quite frankly, they make up a very small portion of our overall revenues, about 4%. And I'm mostly going to talk tonight about real estate taxes and earned income taxes. And the reason why I'm going to talk a lot about them is because you've seen a lot of real estate tax increases. Over the last 22 years, there have been 11 property tax increases ranging between 3% and 25%, which is a lot. And the reason why that happens that way is A, because this is the only tax that can be adjusted, and B, our total assessed value of real estate is flat. So please remember that your assessed value of your real estate is different than your market value of your real estate, but the assessed value of real estate, despite all of the new construction that's happening in the city, et cetera, has remained at a little under 1%. Now, obviously, there was a big jump in 2018 with the county reassessment, but please also know that state law requires that you cannot use a tax reassessment to increase your property taxes. So we actually, when that happened, we had to adjust our millage down for it to be revenue neutral. Also to note that 1/3 of the property value in the city is tax exempt, and no monies are collected for that, although we do receive payments in lieu of taxes, which are voluntary contributions that are made to the city of Lancaster because they do not have a tax bill that they pay. Our largest provider of a pilot is the Penn Medicine LG Health, which contributes $1.5 million a year. Okay, in contrast to this very flat line for real estate is this, which is our earned income tax revenue. Here you can see it between 2015 and 2024, but we went all the way back to 2007 to understand how does the earned income tax revenue change over time. And it increases by an average of 5% a year. This is more than the average annual increase of the city budget each year, which is between 3 and 4% on average since 2011. This is another way to take a look at the general fund revenue between property taxes, earned income taxes, local service, and real estate. You can see how small those are. And then you see other revenue. And then for the last several years, we've had the opportunity for ARPA fundings that have supported a variety of things in the city, including revenue replacement, as well as affordable housing investments and community facilities. So what impact could home rule have on taxes? So as John mentioned, there are no new taxes that are allowed. We have the same 4 taxes, which really means that we have 2, because it's not realistic to change the earned income, the local service tax, because we are not legally allowed to tax anyone who does not live in the city of Lancaster. And the real estate transfer tax is a small overall percentage, and it's also really not practical to build a budget over a what-if scenario, which is, how much real estate is going to be sold next year and for how much? The earned income tax could be increased, and as John mentioned, there is a provision that would limit the growth to 6% annually. And again, the note about right now, City Council could increase our property taxes up to 30 mils. So just to be clear, there are pros and cons to the 2 taxes that remain on the table. The pros to the earned income tax is that it varies over time as a person's income changes over time. If you make more money one year, you pay more. If you make less money the next year, you pay less. It also grows. As we have seen, there have been down years going back in time. I mean, we have the benefit of being able to look back to over the many years. That includes an economic recession in the 05, 06, 07 years, as well as the pandemic, which we all very clearly remember. And additionally, retirees do not pay an earned income tax anywhere in Pennsylvania, not just the city, but if you are retired, you do not pay an earned income tax. As I mentioned, it is more sensitive to economic downturns, and so some years, the earned income tax rates have been lower for a couple of years, but most years they have exceeded 5% on average. Property taxes, less sensitive to economic downturns. This really saved us in the early 2000s with the economic recession because we had a steady revenue source that does not change. But again, that's also the con, which is that it's not variable and it also does not naturally grow over time. It also adds to housing costs. Whether you are a homeowner or a renter, you are paying property taxes in your rent payment or in your, obviously, if you own property. It also affects commercial properties as well as residential properties. And 30% of the people in the city of Lancaster don't pay it. So, I want to just spend a few minutes talking about the 2025 budget and beyond. We have already introduced 2 general fund budget options to City Council for consideration. Both of those budget options are balanced. This is a requirement of state law. We cannot get away with what the state and the federal government do. We must balance our expenses with our revenues. Both include reductions in operating expenses. Both do not include any utilization of our reserves. Both are higher than last year. 99% of the increase in both of the budgets is driven by pension and healthcare costs, and both propose a tax increase. For 2025, we eliminated approximately 20 to 22 positions. These are largely vacant positions that we've held because we've known that coming out of ARPA that we are going to be facing this deficit and we needed to be planning. So while some of the lines in the budget for staff positions were included, they were either zeroed out. We've now taken steps to eliminate those lines. We've consolidated technology services. We've reduced our fleet expenses. We're just launching a pilot here at City Hall that is a fleet sharing model so that we are thinning out the number of cars that are on the road. We've done an analysis of how much it costs for every single one of those cars as we have transitioned to an enterprise, which is a fleet management system. And we've also recently been able to reduce our prescription benefit costs by about $250,000. Let me just say that, you know, typically, every few years, we apply for a grant from the state to procure the services of a financial management consulting firm to come in and help us look at whether we should be insourcing or outsourcing a particular line of business. For example, we've just brought in our street paving. We were outsourcing that before and found that we can get 30% further by doing it ourselves. We also routinely look at our pension obligations and the performance of our pension funds and look at ways that we can maximize our contribution while maintaining a level of contributions that are both required by the state but that maintain our stability as it relates to our pension funds. Why is that important? Because that directly ties to our bond rating, which directly affects our ability and the cost to borrow money. And so we have to keep kind of this equilibrium that's happening across all of these different financial elements in order for us to maintain that bond rating. And I am really pleased to say that our most recent bond rating was renewed and with a strengthened outlook, which was encouraging. So, looking beyond 2025, I'm going to share with you 3 scenarios because a large measure of the decision that you have to make as a voter in the city of Lancaster depends not on next year or the following year, but is really about looking at least a 10-year horizon. So that's what we've done. I'm going to share with you both the impacts of these scenarios, both to you as individual taxpayers in the city, as well as the impact on the city budget. And I also just want to be clear that some of the assumptions that are baked in here. So, same staffing levels. We're not hiring anymore. You may have seen that we've just done a staffing analysis for our police bureau in which, based on the reduction in call volume and overall crime rates in the city, we have reduced the staffing level, the target number of police officers from 145 to 128. We are also, this doesn't include any additional borrowing expenses, which I will say is probably not entirely realistic over the next 10 years for us not to borrow any more money to upgrade parks and continue to invest in street improvements. And we're holding our expenses at 2 to 3%, recognizing that some years we're between 3 and 4, but we are really trying to buckle down and keep our expenses in line with what our collective bargaining agreements are that provide for about a 3% increase for our uniform staff, which are police and fire, and our non-uniform staff as well. Okay, so the first scenario is status quo. This is what we have now, which is the opportunity only to raise money through property taxes. I include the assessed value of $101,000 because it's important for you to know that that is the median assessed value for real estate in the city of Lancaster. The average property is $101,000 assessed value. You can see what the current millage rate is at 12.64, and you can see that over the next 10 years, So in 25, in 26, in 28, in 31, and in 34, there would need to be increases in property taxes. By the time we get 10 years out, there would be a 45% property tax increase. This is the only lever. It is the lever that city council, future city councils will continue to revert to without home rule. I also just want to say that in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that the majority of taxes that are paid in the city of Lancaster are school district taxes. And they have increased by about 2% every year. And I don't expect that to shift, as the school district has recently borrowed another large sum of money to pay for the final phase of renovations to our school buildings. The next scenario, or the next slide here, is looking at the impact of property tax rate increases only. I'm going to draw your attention to line 3, which is our surplus and deficit line, and then also to the fund balance at the bottom. So mostly, this is manageable in terms of the deficits for the city of Lancaster, but there are still deficits. This is not to say that if we raise your taxes by 45%, and my taxes too for that matter, that at the end of it, we are going to be flush with cash. No, we will have about $3 million, and that's, again, assuming that we aren't able to cover those deficits, which I believe that it is possible to cover those deficits, but we would still have like basically the same fund balance of $11 million, and we need about twice that, given the size of our budget. Okay, the next scenario I'm going to show you is with a 0.3% increase to earned income tax and a 0% increase to property taxes. So the median income in the city of Lancaster is about $60,000, so I'm just using that as comparison. That would mean $540 a year that would be paid in earned income taxes. Now, please just remember that there are more people that work in the city than there are properties that pay, and also people's incomes generally increase over the life of someone's career. So, and again, there's flexibility with this, and if you retire, you don't pay this at the end. So, $540 a year, it's an increase of $180. If you simply just compare this to 1 year increase in property taxes, I'll save you the math. This is more. But if you look over the next decade plus, and we just continue to use property taxes to fund the budget, what I have come to the realization is that we are just continuing to crank up housing costs at a moment when housing costs are already very high, both for homeowners and for renters. This is what this looks like for the city budget. We do it's very good in 2025. There's a pretty sizable deficit in 2026. We have some strategies to mitigate this if this is the direction council goes, but they get really big at the end with about like $8 million deficit. It falls off in 2035 because that is when we have when we've paid off a bond and we have some savings that come back into the system. It also means that we really are not in good shape in terms of our fund balance over time. Okay, let's look at 0.5 and what a 0.5 would mean for an average resident. It would be $660 a year, which would be an increase of about $300 over 2024. That's roughly about $12 or $13 a week. No.
$576 a week.
Sorry, are you sure about that? $576 a week?
300 divided.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about 660 divided by, it's about between $12 and $13 a week. This is what it looks like for the city budget. Still some deficits, still some ability to get to maintain, and not really great for our fund balance, but better than property taxes alone. To give you a sense of scope, a 0.5 real estate or 0.5 earned income tax would generate about $6.6 million in the first year. And then we estimate a 5% increase each year after that, recognizing that 5% increase comes with no rate increase. Is everybody following me? Give me a head nod. Okay, all right. Okay, and as John had mentioned, the Pennsylvania Economy League, who was the consultant to the home rule process, provided some data about the 82 municipalities that had adopted home rule between 1952 and 2023. We decided that we didn't want to go as far back as 1952, and instead we decided to look at the 65 communities that have adopted home rule since 1999. And the numbers held up very similarly. Earned income taxes were flat or reduced 90% of the time. Now let's just be clear, they did raise them the first year, but then in subsequent years, they did not raise them 90% of the time. Flat property taxes were flat or reduced 63% of the time, and real estate transfer taxes were flat or reduced 95% of the time. Now, there are other communities that have gone in deep with the real estate transfer tax. One of them is Reading. I do not recommend that. That is not the way to generate revenue for the city long term, and also it just adds more cost to housing, which is not great. And with that, this is the ballot question. Yes vote means that you're voting to adopt the home rule charter. A no vote means that you are in favor of keeping the status quo. Election day is November 5th, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I hope that you all know where your polling places are. If you don't, votepa.gov can let you know where to go. And I am hopeful we will have an amazing turnout of voters, not only here in the city, but across the country. And with that, Amy, John, and I will be happy to field questions. You can just raise your hand.
Yes, sir. In the back.
I understand you can't create any new taxes with the home charter, with the home rule, but what about making exemptions from properties that historically have been away from a property tax, churches, nonprofits, banks or general?
Yeah.
Precluded by state law from eliminating, sorry.
If you could.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, he's asking if we are able to remove exemptions from nonprofit, non-taxable properties in the city of Lancaster, and we are precluded by state law from taxing nonprofits. That would require a change in Harrisburg for that to be allowed in Pennsylvania.
How about like Lancaster?
That's a nonprofit entity. Somebody over here had a question? No?
What is the difference between the current home rule that's currently in effect and the new one that you proposed?
We're not currently a home rule municipality. We're our current code is based on the third class code and the optional charter. Plan A. Thank you.
One or the other?
That would take, do you want to take this, Tony?
Ms. Grievous, are you talking about what's the difference between a regular third-class city code charter and the optional charter? So the optional charter, the real meat of it is essentially it's a slightly different form of government. I believe, if I'm correct, under the third-class city code, I don't think we have the same strong mayor form of government. I believe it's a weak mayor form of government. So the optional charter, which we elected to do in 1970, I believe, somewhere around that period of time, it just slightly changed the form of government, but most of the powers remain the same.
So basically, under the home rule, you would give community power versus municipal power. Is that correct?
No.
That's not correct.
We- We're changing our form of government from the third-class code to a charter. And when the commission decided that they were going to write a charter, which is essentially a constitution for our local government, we decided that we were going to base the baseline on our current form, which is a strong mayor. And from there, we went article by article and redefined what we thought was important to our city by looking at the current code and using the current code to form our decisions on what the new charter constitution would be. And we do have a summary document that outlines the current law, what the charter does, and how they're different. And I would encourage you to read that.
You mentioned about this whole, what if there's uses of power in the administration? Citizens don't really have a lot of protection from the state or anyone from the state, is that correct?
No, we have the Ethics Commission, and we have public meetings where our citizens can come and talk. It's not like we're getting rid of laws. We will have laws. That will be, the charter outlines who and how decisions are made. And there is a clause in there for how citizens have more power under the charter than they do now. And we're going to take some other people's questions. Thank you.
Now, the ethics.
Yes, ma'am in the hat.
What is our bond rating? You said our bond rating has improved. What is it now?
Susie, can I get back to you on that? I don't want to misstate the bond rating, but I'd be happy to let you know what that is.
And the second thing is, it's stated, you don't get home rule, you're going to have an 8% tax increase. But what you're saying is, in home rule, we may have an initial increase in tax. Right?
So the proposals that are separate from the home rule charter, which does not set tax rate, are two options that are before council predicated on the outcome of November 5th. If home rule passes, then council may take up a rate increase to earned income tax to avoid future property tax increases. If, or not, this is a public process and city council needs to move through this process. But this is what's been presented to them. And then the second option is an 8% property tax increase if home rule does not pass. So either way, depending on, no matter what happens on November 5th, there will be a recommended tax increase. Council will ultimately decide. And there is not a rate that's included in the home rule charter. Is that clear? Okay.
There's somebody out, sir.
Commission,
Sir, in the,
Would you please repeat the questions so that everybody understands what question you're answering?
thank you.
You can't hear those questions that are asked over there, and I haven't a clue what question you're answering. Please.
Thank you. Lisa.
Thank you for all the work that's gone into doing this study. I am aware, and this is, I don't want to confuse things, but it seems that like if things were to get really dire, the only solution would be like receivership with the state. And that would be a disaster for actually moving the city forward in any kind of intentional way. I've seen comments on Facebook about like Act 47, is that it? And people comparing apples to oranges with like, well, these cities destroyed themselves with home rule, but they were Act 47 cities that were being controlled by the state until they did home rule, whereas we are potentially doing home rule very intentionally and very carefully for the future of the city. can anyone speak to the Act 47 situation so I can get back on Facebook and correct some disinformation?
I mean, so she's asking how Act 47, which is when municipalities essentially go into bankruptcy, how that impacts their situation and future. So many of the cities that became home rule recently were in Act 47. And what happens when you are in Act 47 is the state gives you flexibility in how you can raise revenue. They give you the ability to raise tax rates, and while the municipality is getting itself out of bankruptcy, it has the ability to change tax rates. So what seems to happen is the leaders in those communities see that they have this flexibility to raise revenue other than just through property taxes, and they decide to go through a home rule study commission and put the vote to the voters, and voters have said, yeah, we want home rule, we want this flexibility.
I'll just add to that, Lisa, just to add to that. I believe we are the only city in the Commonwealth that had, other than in the early 1970s when home rule first became an option, that is proactively going through this process to add more flexibility. Other communities have, as Amy outlined, have come to home rule because they've first gone bankrupt. So we're very different in the state.
Thank you, that's helpful. Thanks.
Why was the ethics commission, the advisory, how many complaints have there been?
Ms. Grievous, I'm not sure what you're asking about the Ethics Commission and your question about the Ethics Commission and the advisory, the Human Relations Commission.
Relations commission and the advisory have been combined.
That is true, but that is not in the purview of home rule. So you're asking about the combination of two commissions, that is City Council's jurisdiction. That is not what this commission is doing.
It's going to be all, basically, they're saying that discrimination complaint, you would have to do local through the ethics.
So I know that you want these questions repeated over here, sir. I'm trying to digest your questions, but they're just not relevant to the subject of home rule.
I think I might know what she's talking about.
I know she's asking questions about the two commissions, the human relations bodies, we'll call them, that were combined. But that is not a matter of home rule. That is a matter of city council.
Which is influenced by administration.
Can I? So through the administrative code article, City Council has to define commissions, boards, and authorities. So that will be defined during the development of the administrative code.
But the problem is citizens are being bored to labor the money. And people like me have gone to city council repeatedly, who've been ignored, delayed, or denied. Everything gets covered up, and there's abuse of power. So
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone else have a question?
For ethics violation.
Yes, ma'am.
Home rule is adopted, is it possible that both EITC and property taxes are raised?
So she's asking if home rule passes, is it possible for both the earned income and the property tax rates to raise?
Yeah, that is possible. Yes. Yeah, and, what I would add to that is, so nothing changes about how City Council sets tax rates each year. So what has changed is that we have implemented a 6% limit from one year to the next. So on total tax revenue. So all taxes combined may not be proposed to be increased more than 6%. So, earned income tax could be proposed to go up 6% and property tax 0%. and it would stay within limit. They could each go up 3%. They may go up more than that, but if certain circumstances would make that necessary, in order for that to be possible, that would require an additional vote by city council, like a supermajority. So, currently the majority of city council is 4. To exceed that 6% limit, it would require a supermajority, so 5 votes instead of 4.
In the extended budget process.
I'm sorry?
The extended budget approval process.
Oh, just talk about that? Yeah, and then all of this would come within a lengthier budget review process that begins in October rather than end of November, early December.
So I think the idea of a 5-year capital budget projection is a good idea. And I like the idea of the 3-year general fund projection, but I'm wondering why it's so short. Because the normal rule when you're doing capital budgeting and trying to anticipate the impact on future budgets is you have to have a capital project delivered and causing some spending in the general fund budget before you see the impact. Did you all consider a longer general fund budget projection?
We did not. I mean, I shouldn't say we did not. I think we talked about what would be the appropriate length of time for a forecast. And I think that we felt that a longer forecast for the general fund would get too speculative. And we feel like requiring a total of 3 years is a significant improvement over just 1 year. So we feel like we've improved the process and not required the administration or city council to get too speculative with a longer range forecast. And I'm sorry.
And that's okay. And I'll just add to that, we still are doing 10-year budget forecasts, and at the end of every one of our budgets for at least the last decade, there is a 10-year look ahead that has been provided. That includes some of the same assumptions that I used for the slides that I presented tonight. For our capital plan, the 5-year is embedded within time horizons that extend out 50 years in terms of our capital budgeting. But 5 years was what what the commission landed on and what we're going to be presenting. And if you really want to dig into that, come to the November meetings, because we're going to be talking a lot more about capital.
Ma'am in the white.
Just a clarification, earned income, and when we talk about earned income, I think the city currently doesn't tax rental, is that correct? And is that
Okay.
considered-
So the question is whether the city taxes rental income? No. The city, there's 4 taxes, basically 2, property tax and earned income.
Let me just, so I would say it depends on the structure in which you are collecting income and how you claim that as part of your taxes. And I'm not going to pretend that I fully can appreciate every situation, but what I would say is that your income and how this would impact you is predicated on your reported income to the state and how to the state, because we are using that number to then determine your earned income tax.
So, yeah, there's,
Yeah.
Henry.
2 questions and a brief comment about the 6%, just so everybody knows. There is a waiver of 6% limit of 2 years for transition.
That's correct.
So it could be well above 6% for the first 2 years. Question 1, I was looking online for the questions from the previous education session, and the only one I was able to find online was for October 3rd. And I was wondering if the other questions, if there were any that were submitted, where I could find those online.
We didn't get any written questions at the other meetings.
Oh, really? No other?
People just asked them.
yeah, so the discussion is we about collecting written questions, preparing responses, and publishing those responses online. And yes, we did not receive any written questions, so we did not publish any responses online.
And then the other question I have is with regard to the number of petitions that could go on a ballot is currently 2. Why is it limited to 2?
2?
Like if an ordinance that would go onto the ballot, or that comes up to council and council says no, but then it gets pushed through the system so it could go onto a ballot so the city could vote on it. Why is it limited to 2?
Do we say that?
If I'm making sense, maybe.
I think.
Are you, I believe that you're asking that we can only, the charter defines that only 2 referendum can be on a ballot at one time? Is that what you're asking? I would love to be able to remember that discussion that we had about that, but I believe we were going with some best practices and also trying not to flood any one ballot with too many questions at one time. But I'd have to dig pretty deep to really get super specific about that. But
Is there any of that?
do any of the other commissioners?
Any of the other
remember?
commissioners? Okay. And Henry, I appreciate you pointing out the 6%. I would just offer that the 2 proposed budgets that are available on the website that can be reviewed do not come close to 6%.
Fair enough.
Yes.
I just wanted to say I did attend the full day of budget reports, and in particular, I thought Public Works did an excellent job of looking down the road of where we are going as a city, not just the 5-year projection. They're online now, I think, aren't they, that you could look at the discussion. So I just wanted to say that.
How much money was spent on this on
How much money was spent on home rule? If I'm correct, it was about $133,000.
The budget is in our report, which is online. It's a pretty detailed budget. And much of it, or a large portion, was in kind from the city for staff time.
And
grant funded.
grant funded, that's the part that I wanted to add.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess we'll call it.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for coming. There's a lot of really good information on the website. Please take a look. Thank you.
Thank you.